My history teacher failed me because my handwriting was too nice for a poor kid. She said working-class students don't have time to develop pretty letters and accused me of parent forgery. When I made a TikTok showing my handwriting samples from age 7, it went viral and exposed her 15-year pattern of failing students from low-income families to destroy their scholarship chances. My history teacher, Ms. D. Thompson, was convinced I was cheating because I had nice handwriting. She joined our school after working 20 years at some fancy academy. You know the type. Lacrosse, Ralph Lauren, and pretty girls with trust funds. You could tell she thought we were all trash. And after our Civil War essay, I was proven right, because that's when she called me back after school. "Sarah," she said, holding my essay between two fingers like it might bite her, "this isn't your handwriting." I literally froze for a sec like, bruh, what? Of course it is. Students from working families don't have time to develop handwriting like this. Your parents clearly wrote this for you. The audacity. Like, ma'am, just because we shop at Target doesn't mean we can't write pretty letters. I tried explaining how my big sister taught me during summer when I was 7, that I was so bored I spent hours practicing in those old-fashioned workbooks she bought me, but that wasn't good enough for Ms. Fancy Pants. "I'm giving you a 0 for parent forgery," she announced. "I've been teaching for 25 years. I know authentic student work when I see it." "Yeah, well, I've been poor for 17 years, and I know a stuck-up bitch when I see one," I wanted to say, but instead, I strategized. And for our next assignment on the Constitution, I purposely wrote with my left hand. I even added a few crossed-out words and made my letters less uniform. It called me to turn in something that looked clapped, but I figured it was better than another 0. A week later, Ms. Thompson handed it back with a C- and angry red ink everywhere. "You're deliberately trying to make your writing look R-worded," she said when everyone had left. "This is just another form of deception." I was so angry that I didn't even notice that my teacher just used a slur. "Are you serious? First my writing is too good, so I make it messier, and now that's cheating too?" She leaned back in her chair and crossed her arms. Students who forge their parents' handwriting often try to cover their tracks like this. The rumors started spreading. Suddenly, Emma with her art background was under suspicion. Tommy, whose dad was a font designer, got called out next. Anyone with decent handwriting became a target. But instead of coming to her senses, she announced a new policy. I had to complete all assignments in her classroom during lunch detention so she could watch me write. FML. I sat there every single day, crafting essays while she stood so close to me I could smell her nasty vegetable breath. She'd roll her eyes and mumble things like, "Public school kids just don't develop these skills." Like, bitch, what? Just say you hate poor people and go. The breaking point came during our midterm, a 2-hour in-class essay on the Industrial Revolution. No notes, no leaving the room, just me and my pen and 3 blue books. I wrote carefully about labor conditions and technological advancement, my hand cramping by the end. Got it back with a giant F and red ink everywhere. "Mandatory meeting," scrawled across the front. I stayed after class, my hands shaking with rage. "You watched me write this," I said, voice shaking, "for 3 hours. In this room. How is this possible?" She pulled out her phone and showed me a screenshot from some teaching forum. "I've been researching. Students can memorize entire parent-written essays and reproduce them during exam." That's when I lost it. I yanked my backpack open and pulled out everything. My journal from 8th grade, birthday cards I'd written to friends, thank you notes with dates on them, mwahaha. "Look at these," I said, spreading them across her desk. "Look at the dates. I've been writing like this since I was 7. She barely glanced at them. "These could all be forged. I know your type." Like, hello? I pinched the bridge of my nose and didn't respond. And the next day, I came into school with an armed weapon, my mother. And if you have a Latina mom, then you know it's like bringing a nuclear bomb to a knife fight. She brought her own handwriting samples, which looked like a doctor's prescription pad had exploded. Completely illegible chicken scratch. "I can barely write my own name legibly," my mom said calmly. "Look at Sarah's samples versus mine. How could I have written her essays?" I grinned as I watched Ms. Thompson squirm in her seat. But my mom wasn't done. She suggested I write something new right then and there. Any prompt Mr. Thompson wanted. "I know," Ms. Thompson exclaimed with a smirk. "Write about the Carlist Wars in Spain, a topic literally no one knows." She really thought she ate, because little did she know I was a huge nerd, and I knew all about the 19th century Spanish Civil War. I wrote for 30 minutes while they sat in silence. When I finished, she held it up against my previous work, comparing every loop and curve. Ms. Thompson's face went from red to purple to pink. Finally, that crusty old bitch waved the white flag. I suppose they do match, but you can't be too careful these days. Academic integrity is crucial. I nodded like the battle was over, but little did she know, I had documented everything, and I was about to end her career. I uploaded the video that night. The TikTok showed my handwriting samples from over the years, starting with those workbooks from when I was 7. Each page had dates clearly visible, birthday cards, school assignments, journal entries. The caption read, "POV, your teacher thinks you're too poor to have nice handwriting." Within an hour, the view count was climbing fast. Comments poured in from students who'd had similar experiences. By morning, it had over 50,000 views. Ms. Thompson must have seen it during first period because she was frantically texting when I walked past her classroom. Her face was red, and she kept glancing at her phone between messages. During lunch, I checked my email and found one from the principal asking me to take down the video immediately due to cyberbullying concerns. I was heading to my car after school when Ms. Thompson appeared, blocking my path. Her hands shook as she held up her phone. I pulled out my own phone and started live streaming. She stepped closer, her voice rising. She claimed I was ruining her reputation, that entitled students always tried to destroy good teachers. The words tumbled out faster as more students gathered to watch. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma. Her mom had seen the video. Emma's mom was on the school board, and she wanted to meet with me. The message included her number and a simple, "Call me when you can." Ms. Thompson saw me looking at my phone and demanded I delete the video before tomorrow's school board meeting. Her voice cracked on the word meeting. She knew what this could mean. That evening, I sat at my desk staring at the delete button. The video had reached 200,000 views. Stories poured into my DMS from students across the country. But I also had 17 missed calls from a number I didn't recognize. I decided to leave it up. Within an hour, an email arrived from someone claiming to be Ms. Thompson's lawyer friend. The subject line threatened legal action for defamation. The email used big words to sound scary, but I noticed it came from a Gmail account, not a law firm. The next morning, morning, I arrived early to retrieve my notebook from Ms. Thompson's classroom. The security office was empty, but the door was cracked open. Through the gap, I saw Ms. Thompson at the computer, clicking through files. She was deleting footage from the past month, including all those lunch detentions where she'd watched me write. I stepped into the doorway. She spun around, her face going pale. The panic in her eyes told me everything. She knew I'd caught her destroying evidence. By lunch, my mom had received 3 calls from other parents. Ms. Thompson was calling everyone, claiming I had doctored the evidence, that I was a troubled student who couldn't accept criticism. One parent said their daughter was considering switching out of AP history because of the drama. Tommy found me after school. His dad had run my handwriting samples through font analysis software at his design firm. The results showed perfect consistency across all the years. He handed me a folder with the printouts, scientific proof that my handwriting had developed naturally over time. That evening, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. It was Ms. Thompson's teaching assistant. She wanted to talk but was scared of losing her job. We agreed to meet at the coffee shop downtown. Jake picked me up for our Friday date looking uncomfortable. His parents had seen the video and thought I should just let it go. He kept saying it wasn't worth the trouble, that Ms. Thompson would retire soon anyway. When I asked whose side he was on, he stared at his steering wheel. I spent Saturday afternoon digging through Rate My Teacher reviews. Ms. Thompson's profile went back 15 years. The pattern was obvious. Every few years, comments appeared about unfair grading, especially regarding handwriting. One review from her previous school mentioned a student losing a scholarship over similar accusations. Ms. Thompson scheduled mandatory parent conferences for the following week. The email emphasized that attendance was required for any student with grade disputes. She was trying to control the narrative, to get parents alone where she could spin her version. Monday morning, I discovered my college recommendation letter from Mr. Rodriguez had mysteriously vanished from the guidance office system. The secretary said there must have been a computer glitch, but her eyes wouldn't meet mine. I waited outside the vice principal's office for an hour. When Mrs. Chen finally saw me, she dismissed everything as a personality conflict. She mentioned that she and Ms. Thompson had been friends for years, even pulled up photos from their wine night last month on her phone. The message was clear. That night, I created a fake social media account and requested to join the Educators Against AI group Ms. Thompson belonged to. Within hours, I was in. Her posts from the previous school were still there. She bragged about catching wealthy cheaters and complained about entitled students who thought money could buy them grades. Every post dripped with resentment toward anyone she saw as privileged. The English department group chat leaked the next day. Screenshots showed teachers discussing how Ms. Thompson graded handwriting instead of content. Mr. Williams had noticed she gave lower scores to essays with messier writing, regardless of the actual arguments. Ms. Garcia mentioned that she'd started warning her students to write neatly for history class. I started tracking which students Ms. Thompson targeted. The pattern became obvious. First-generation college students, kids who qualified for free lunch, anyone whose parents worked multiple jobs. She went after the ones who needed scholarships, who couldn't afford to fail a class. The teaching assistant finally messaged me directly. She'd been documenting Ms. Thompson's grading for weeks. Photos of essays with identical content but different handwriting styles, graded completely differently. She was building her own file but was terrified of retaliation. 3 more students reached out privately after seeing the video. Each had similar stories. Accusations of cheating based on handwriting, forced to redo assignments, grades tanked for no reason. They'd been too scared to speak up before. Ms. Thompson tried to implement a no-phones policy in her classroom. The other history teachers blocked it immediately. They knew what she was trying to hide. The department was fracturing, and everyone could see it. Friday afternoon, I was buying lunch when the cafeteria worker pulled me aside. She'd overheard Ms. Thompson crying in the bathroom, complaining about ungrateful poor kids who didn't appreciate real education. The woman shook her head and said she'd pray for Ms. Thompson, that she seemed to be struggling with something deep inside. Ms. Thompson assigned me to present about academic integrity to the underclassmen during their orientation assembly. The email arrived Sunday night, copying the principal and vice principal. She framed it as an opportunity for me to share my passion for honest scholarship. The subtext was clear: public humiliation disguised as education. I recognized the tactic immediately. While researching her previous school, I'd found a similar case. A student named Marcus had been forced to give the same presentation after questioning her grading methods. He'd transferred schools the following semester. Monday morning brought an unexpected development. Marcus's dad, who still lived in town, had seen my video. He ran a small tech consulting firm and offered to analyze handwriting samples from Ms. Thompson's current and former students. Within hours, he'd processed dozens of submissions through professional software. The results were damning. Ms. Thompson consistently gave failing grades to students with naturally neat handwriting from working-class backgrounds. Meanwhile, wealthy students with terrible penmanship received passing marks. The data showed a clear pattern of discrimination based on socioeconomic assumptions. Ms. Thompson must have sensed the walls closing in. She approached the school librarian, requesting that all my library computer usage be monitored for signs of cheating. The librarian, Mrs. Park, refused. She told other staff members about the bizarre request, adding another crack to Ms. Thompson's facade. I spent Tuesday evening creating a comprehensive document. Screenshots of Ms. Thompson's grading rubric revealed her bias in writing. Under authenticity markers, she'd listed characteristics like inconsistent letter spacing and irregular baseline as signs of genuine student work. Essentially, she believed poor kids couldn't write neatly. The principal finally agreed to meet with me Wednesday morning. I arrived with my evidence folder, hoping for resolution. Instead, he offered platitudes about looking into the situation and suggested I focus on my studies. His dismissive tone made it clear where his loyalties lay. After the meeting, I found myself in the bathroom with 3 other students who'd been targeted. We shared our experiences, each story reinforcing the pattern. Maria had lost her valedictorian standing. David's scholarship applications were jeopardized. Aisha had dropped AP history entirely. We exchanged numbers and started a group chat. That afternoon, I went through old yearbooks in the library. The pattern stretched back years. In every graduating class since Ms. Thompson arrived, minority students and those from working-class families had mysteriously dropped out of AP history at higher rates. The few who remained rarely received A's. Thursday brought a breakthrough. A teacher from Ms. Thompson's previous school reached out through social media. She'd witnessed similar behavior but hadn't spoken up at the time. She provided dates and names, expanding the pattern beyond our school. Ms. Thompson had been targeting vulnerable students for over a decade. During Friday's department meeting, Ms. Thompson's composure finally cracked. When discussing grading standards, she launched into a rant about maintaining academic integrity against students who thought they could fake their way to success. The other teachers exchanged uncomfortable glances as she specifically mentioned students from certain neighborhoods. I maintained my composure throughout the week, attending classes and completing assignments. Other teachers noticed. My English teacher pulled me aside to compliment my maturity in handling the situation. My math teacher offered to write an additional college recommendation to replace the missing one. The parent-teacher conferences loomed next week, creating a natural deadline. Parents were talking, comparing notes about their children's experiences. My mom had started a group chat that grew to include over 30 families. They decided to attend the conferences together. Strength in numbers. Security footage from the past month revealed something disturbing. Ms. Thompson had been staying after school for hours, obsessively comparing handwriting samples. She'd created elaborate charts tracking loop sizes and slant angles. The janitor mentioned finding stacks of photocopied student work in her classroom trash. During Monday's faculty meeting, her mask slipped completely. When the principal mentioned reviewing grading policies, Ms. Thompson exploded. She ranted about how these people didn't understand real education, how standards were being destroyed. Several teachers recorded her tirade on their phones. I received an email from Ms. Thompson Tuesday morning. She offered a fresh start if I removed the video and apologized publicly. She promised to restore my grades and write a glowing recommendation. The desperation was palpable. I screenshot the email and added it to my evidence file. By Wednesday, teachers throughout the school were quietly questioning Ms. Thompson's methods. The math department analyzed her grade distributions. The science teachers compared notes about students who excelled in their classes but failed history. The evidence mounted from every direction. I spent hours creating a timeline of Ms. Thompson's discriminatory behavior, each incident connected to scholarship deadlines or college application seasons. She didn't just target students randomly. She systematically sabotaged those who needed high grades for financial aid. The cruelty was calculated. Thursday's development changed everything. Ms. Thompson's teaching assistant, Jennifer, finally broke her silence. She'd been documenting biased grading for months, photographing essays before and after grading. She had proof that Ms. Thompson graded based on names and addresses, not content quality. The pattern was undeniable. Students from certain zip codes received lower grades. Those with ethnic names faced harsher criticism. First-generation college applicants were held to impossible standards. Jennifer had dates, photos, and her own written observations. She'd been building this case quietly, waiting for the right moment. Friday morning, I noticed Ms. Thompson's car in the parking lot before sunrise. Through her classroom window, I could see her frantically reorganizing files. She was trying to hide evidence, but it was too late. Too many people had copies. Too many witnesses had come forward. Emma's mom, the school board member, had been busy all week. She'd spoken with other board members, sharing the evidence we'd compiled. The board meeting next Tuesday would include a special session on grading policies. Ms. Thompson's reign of terror had an expiration date. I spent the weekend ensuring younger students wouldn't become targets while this played out. I created a shared document with tips for dealing with Ms. Thompson's accusations. I paired vulnerable freshmen with supportive upperclassmen. We wouldn't let her destroy anyone else while fighting for justice. The parent group had grown beyond our school. Parents from Ms. Thompson's previous district joined our chat. They shared stories of children who'd given up on college dreams, who'd internalized messages about not being good enough. The damage extended far beyond failed assignments. Monday arrived with palpable tension. Ms. Thompson's attempts to discredit the video had failed spectacularly. She'd claimed it was edited, but tech-savvy parents verified its authenticity. She'd insisted the handwriting samples were fake, but multiple experts confirmed their legitimacy. Each lie deepened the hole she'd dug. During lunch, Mr. Peterson from the science department approached me. He'd witnessed Ms. Thompson grading papers in the teacher's lounge. She'd marked names before reading essays, assigning grades based on her assumptions about students. He'd photographed the incident and would testify to what he'd seen. The truth was spreading through the school like wildfire. Students who'd suffered in silence found their voices. Teachers who'd noticed problems felt empowered to speak up. Parents who'd accepted their children's failures began questioning the system. Ms. Thompson's carefully constructed facade crumbled piece by piece. Tuesday's school board meeting approached with the force of an avalanche. Parents had organized carpools. Students prepared statements. Teachers gathered evidence. The entire community mobilized around a simple truth. No teacher should destroy futures based on prejudice. I spent Monday evening reviewing everything we'd compiled. Hundreds of pages of evidence, dozens of witness statements, years of systematic discrimination documented in detail. Ms. Thompson had no defense against facts. Her own words and actions condemned her. The IT department confirmed what I'd witnessed. Ms. Thompson had deleted security footage using her login credentials. She'd tried to destroy evidence of her behavior during lunch detentions, but the system kept backups she didn't know about. Technology she didn't understand had preserved the truth. That night, I couldn't sleep. Tomorrow's board meeting would determine not just my future, but the futures of countless students. Would the board act on our evidence? Would Ms. Thompson face consequences? Would systemic change protect future generations? The questions swirled endlessly. Tuesday morning arrived gray and drizzly, fitting weather for a reckoning. I dressed carefully, choosing clothes that showed respect for the process. My mom made breakfast, but neither of us ate much. We both understood the gravity of what lay ahead. The school parking lot filled early. Parents arrived in groups, supporting each other. Students gathered in clusters, sharing last-minute encouragement. Even teachers who weren't required to attend showed up. The community had united against injustice. Inside the board meeting room, tension crackled like electricity. Ms. Thompson sat in the front row with someone who looked like a lawyer. Her usual confidence had evaporated. She fidgeted with her papers and avoided eye contact with everyone. The board president called the special session to order. She acknowledged the unprecedented turnout and the serious nature of the allegations. She promised a fair hearing for all parties. The formality of the proceedings added weight to our cause. Parents presented first. They shared shared stories of children crushed by unfair grades. They showed financial aid letters denied due to GPA requirements. They displayed college rejection letters that might have been acceptances. The human cost of Ms. Thompson's prejudice became undeniable. Students spoke next. Voice after voice described the same pattern. Accusations based on handwriting, grades that didn't match effort or knowledge, dreams deferred or destroyed. Some cried while speaking. Others channeled their pain into powerful testimony. Teachers presented the academic evidence. Grade distributions that defied statistical probability. Evaluation methods that violated district policy. Documentation of discriminatory statements. Their professional analysis stripped away any pretense of legitimate pedagogy. When the board called for Ms. Thompson's response, her lawyer spoke first. He argued about mob mentality and rushed to judgment. He claimed personality conflicts had been blown out of proportion. His polished words felt hollow against the mountain of evidence. Ms. Thompson finally spoke for herself. She insisted she'd maintained high standards. She claimed students today expected easy grades. She portrayed herself as a victim of entitled children and helicopter parents. Not once did she address the specific evidence against her. The board asked pointed questions. Why did her grading patterns show clear socioeconomic bias? How did she explain the security footage deletion? What justified her comments about poor students? Ms. Thompson's answers grew increasingly incoherent. During a brief recess, I overheard Ms. Thompson on the phone. She was trying to contact former colleagues for character references. From her side of the conversation, it seemed no one wanted to help. Her professional network had abandoned her. The hearing resumed with additional testimony. The teaching assistant presented her documentation. The IT department confirmed the deleted footage. Former students from her previous school joined via video call. Each piece of evidence built an insurmountable case. As the evidence mounted, Ms. Thompson's lawyer requested a private conference with the board. They disappeared into a side room for 20 minutes. When they returned, Ms. Thompson looked defeated. Whatever deal he'd tried to negotiate had failed. The board president announced they would deliberate immediately. The room buzzed with nervous energy as we waited. Parents held hands, students checked their phones, teachers graded papers to pass time. Everyone understood we'd reached a pivotal moment. After an hour, the board returned. The president's expression was grave but determined. She announced that the evidence clearly showed a pattern of discriminatory grading practices. Ms. Thompson would be placed on administrative leave immediately, pending a full investigation, but they didn't stop there. The board announced a comprehensive review of grading policies district-wide. They mandated bias training for all teachers. They established an anonymous reporting system for grade disputes. They promised systematic change to prevent future discrimination. Ms. Thompson's face cycled through emotions: shock, anger, disbelief, and finally something like recognition. Her lawyer whispered urgently in her ear, but she waved him off. She gathered her things and walked out without a word. The room erupted in a mixture of tears and celebration. Parents hugged their children. Students thanked teachers who'd supported them. The community had achieved something remarkable through collective action. Justice had prevailed through persistence and truth. The board's decision triggered immediate action throughout the school. Ms. Thompson cleared out her classroom that same evening. Boxes stacked in the hallway as she worked alone. I watched from across the courtyard as she loaded her car, her movements mechanical and defeated. Wednesday morning brought unexpected visitors. Former students from Ms. Thompson's previous school arrived to share their experiences with our administration. One woman, now in her 30s, explained how Ms. Thompson's accusations had derailed her college plans. She'd believed for years that her handwriting proved she wasn't smart enough for higher education. The teaching assistant Jennifer met with the principal to formally present her documentation. She'd photographed over 200 graded assignments showing clear bias patterns. Students with addresses from certain neighborhoods consistently received lower grades, regardless of content quality. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from students who'd suffered under Ms. Thompson's prejudice. They shared stories of changed majors, abandoned scholarship applications, and shattered confidence. Each message reinforced the importance of what we'd accomplished together. Thursday afternoon, the district announced mandatory retraining for all teachers on unconscious bias and fair grading practices. The sessions would begin immediately, with follow-up evaluations throughout the year. Real change was happening, not just empty promises. I spent hours helping other students file formal grade appeals. We organized the evidence systematically, creating individual packets for each affected student. The administration promised expedited reviews, understanding that college applications depended on corrected transcripts. Ms. Thompson made one final attempt to salvage her reputation. She sent a mass email to parents claiming she'd been unfairly targeted by students who couldn't meet high standards. The email backfired spectacularly when parents compared notes and realized she'd sent different versions with contradictory claims. Friday brought news that shook everyone. An anonymous teacher from Ms. Thompson's previous district leaked internal documents showing she'd been quietly transferred after similar incidents. The district had chosen to pass the problem along rather than address it directly. The pattern of enabling stretched back 15 years. The school board called an emergency session to address the systemic failures that allowed Ms. Thompson to continue teaching despite repeated complaints. Board members faced tough questions about oversight and accountability. Parents demanded answers about how many other teachers might be engaging in similar discrimination. I worked with Emma's mom to create a presentation for the District Equity Committee. We compiled data showing how Ms. Thompson's grading had disproportionately affected students who qualified for free lunch programs. The correlation was stark and undeniable when visualized in graphs and charts. Marcus's dad expanded his analysis to include all of Ms. Thompson's classes over 5 years. The results revealed that working-class students were 3 times more likely to receive failing grades in her classes compared to wealthy students with identical test scores. The discrimination was systematic and deliberate. The principal announced that all of Ms. Thompson's current students would have their grades reviewed by an independent panel. 3 retired teachers volunteered to re-evaluate every assignment from the past 2 years. They promised fair, unbiased assessments based solely on content quality. Jennifer, the teaching assistant, decided to pursue her teaching certification after witnessing the impact of standing up for students. She'd been inspired by how the community rallied together to fight injustice. Her testimony had been crucial in exposing the truth. The IT department implemented new protocols to prevent evidence deletion. All security footage would now be backed up to cloud storage with restricted access. Teachers could no longer delete recordings without multiple approvals and documented reasons. Students who'd dropped AP history because of Ms. Thompson were invited to return. The school offered summer credit recovery programs and waived all fees. Several students jumped at the chance to reclaim their academic paths. I received a letter from the National Honor Society reversing their earlier decision to reject my application. They'd based their denial on Ms. Thompson's recommendation, which claimed I lacked integrity. With her credibility destroyed, they reconsidered using my other teachers' recommendations. The local community college reached out to affected students, offering guaranteed admission and scholarship opportunities. They recognized that many of us had been unfairly disadvantaged and wanted to help level the playing field. Several students who'd given up on college started filling out applications. Ms. Thompson's replacement arrived the following week. Ms. Martinez had a reputation for fair, compassionate teaching. She immediately announced that all students would start fresh, with grades based solely on demonstrated knowledge and effort. The relief in the classroom was palpable. Parents organized a support group for families affected by discriminatory grading practices. They met weekly to share resources and strategies for advocating within the school system. My mom became one of the group's leaders, using her experience to help others navigate the bureaucracy. The district implemented blind grading for all subjective assignments. Teachers would no longer see student names when evaluating essays or projects. The system wasn't perfect, but it represented a significant step toward eliminating bias. I helped create a student handbook on recognizing and reporting discriminatory practices. We distributed copies throughout the school and posted digital versions online. Knowledge was power, and we wanted every student armed with information. The grade review panel worked tirelessly through stacks of assignments. They found consistent patterns of unfair grading, particularly for essays that demonstrated critical thinking from non-traditional perspectives. Ms. Thompson had punished students for challenging conventional narratives. Several colleges contacted affected students directly, acknowledging that their transcripts might not reflect their true abilities. Admissions officers promised to consider the circumstances and look beyond potentially deflated GPAs. Some even waived application fees as a gesture of support. The school board approved funding for a full-time equity officer position. This person would investigate complaints of discrimination and ensure fair treatment for all students. The community had demanded systemic change, and the board was finally responding. Ms. Thompson's teaching license came under review by the State Education Board. The evidence compiled by our community formed the basis of their investigation. Her pattern of discrimination across multiple districts could no longer be ignored or covered up. Students organized a celebration for everyone who'd contributed to exposing the truth. We gathered in the park, sharing food and stories. The atmosphere was hopeful, with people talking about futures that suddenly seemed possible again. The ripple effects continued spreading. Other schools in the district began reviewing their own grading practices. Teachers who dismissed concerns started taking them seriously. The culture was shifting, slowly but surely. I received acceptance letters from several colleges, including some I'd thought were out of reach. My corrected transcript, combined with a compelling essay about fighting injustice, had opened doors Ms. Thompson tried to close. Each acceptance felt like vindication. The final grade reviews revealed the full extent of Ms. Thompson's discrimination. Over 300 students had been affected during her tenure at our school. The administration committed to notifying every single one and offering transcript corrections. As graduation approached, I reflected on the journey. What started as anger over unfair treatment had grown into a movement for justice. We'd exposed not just one biased teacher, but an entire system that enabled discrimination. The ceremony included a special recognition for students who'd overcome significant obstacles. When they called my name, the auditorium erupted in applause. My beautiful handwriting, once used as evidence against me, had helped expose a pattern of prejudice. I stood at the podium, looking out at faces that had supported this fight. Teachers who'd testified, parents who'd organized, students who'd found their voices. Together, we'd changed our school forever. My grandmother's handwriting workbook sat on display at the graduation party. Those hours spent practicing as a 7-year-old had led to this moment. Ms. Thompson had tried to use my skills against me, but they'd become the tools of her downfall. The summer brought news that Ms. Thompson's teaching license had been revoked. She could no longer move to another district and continue her discrimination. The system had finally held her accountable for the damage she'd caused. I prepared for college knowing I'd made a difference. Future students wouldn't face the same prejudice. They could write beautifully without suspicion, excel without accusation. The policies we'd fought for would protect them. My acceptance letter to my dream school arrived with a handwritten note from the admissions officer. She commended my courage in standing up to injustice and said the university needed more students like me. My handwriting had opened doors after all, just not the way anyone expected. The local school board adopted our equity proposals as district-wide policy. Anonymous reporting systems, blind grading options, and regular bias training became standard. What we'd started had grown beyond our single school. As I packed for college, I included those old handwriting workbooks. They reminded me that skills developed with love and patience could never be weapons against me. They were gifts that no prejudiced teacher could take away. The impact of our fight would last long after I left. Younger students now knew they could challenge unfair treatment. Teachers understood they'd be held accountable. Parents realized their voices mattered. The culture had shifted fundamentally. I left for college carrying the knowledge that ordinary people could create extraordinary change. We hadn't needed lawyers or media attention, just determination, documentation, and a community willing to stand together against injustice. My beautiful cursive had become a symbol of resistance. What Ms. Thompson saw as evidence of cheating was actually evidence of dedication, practice, and family love. She'd tried to weaponize my gifts against me, but instead revealed her own prejudice. The changes we'd implemented would protect countless students. No teacher could again use handwriting as a proxy for discrimination. No student would have their future derailed by baseless accusations. We'd built safeguards into the system itself. My story ended not with revenge, but with reform. Ms. Thompson faced consequences, but more importantly, the system that enabled her was dismantled and rebuilt. Future students would benefit from our struggle, even if they never knew our names. I arrived at college ready to to excel, my transcript finally reflecting my true abilities. The girl with beautiful handwriting had won, not through individual triumph, but through collective action. Together, we'd written a new chapter for our school, one where every student's potential could flourish regardless of their background. A little cameo at the end here. This is Requested Reads. Hope you guys all enjoy your day, and comment down below how much you hated the new voices.